The telegram arrived at Clint Eastwood's house on a Tuesday afternoon in January 1964. It was short, 11 words. Broken English. Sender's name misspelled at the bottom. Western Film Spain, 3 months, $15,000 interested Leone. Clint read it twice. Then he set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it might explain itself if he waited long enough. His wife Maggie walked in, saw him standing there. "What's that?" "Job offer, I think." She picked up the telegram. "Read it." "Who's Leone?" "No idea." "What kind of Western?" "Doesn't say." "15,000 for 3 months. That's good money." Clint nodded. It was good money. Better than good. He was making about $1,000 an episode on Rawhide, and the show was on hiatus. 3 months in Spain for $15,000 was more than he'd make sitting around Los Angeles, waiting for the next season to start. But something about it felt off. The telegram was too vague. Too casual. Like someone was offering him a job without actually knowing what the job was. "You going to call them?" Maggie asked. "I don't have a number. Just a name." "So what are you going to do?" Clint picked up the telegram again. Studied it. "I'm going to wait and see if they send another one." They didn't send another telegram. They sent a man. His name was Harry Joe Brown, Jr. He was a producer's son, working as a liaison between American actors and European productions. Mid-30s. Smooth talker. He showed up at Clint's house 3 days later in a suit that was slightly too nice for a Thursday afternoon meeting. "Mr. Eastwood," Harry said, shaking Clint's hand. "Thanks for seeing me. You're with Leone? I represent his interests in the States. May I come in?" They sat in the living room. Harry opened a briefcase and pulled out a script. Or what was supposed to be a script. It was maybe 40 pages. Typed on thin paper. The English was rough. Grammatically incorrect. Sentences that didn't quite make sense. "This is it?" Clint asked. "It's a working draft. Sergio's still developing it." "What's it about?" Harry smiled. "It's a Western. But not like the Westerns you're used to. It's different." "Different how?" "Well, for one thing, it's violent. Very violent. People die in ways they don't die on American television." Clint flipped through the pages. He saw scene descriptions. A massacre. A torture sequence. A final shootout that involved dynamite and corpses. "This wouldn't get past the censors in the States," Clint said. "That's why we're shooting in Spain. Different rules. And Leone. Who is he?" "Sergio Leone. Italian director. He's done a few peplum films. Sword and sandal stuff. But this is his first Western. His first real Western. So he's never made anything like this before. No one's made anything like this before. That's the point." Clint set the script down. "Why me?" Harry leaned back. "Sergio saw you on Rawhide. He liked your face. He liked the way you move. He said you have the right, what did he call it, economia di gesto? I don't speak Italian. Economy of gesture. You don't waste movement. Everything you do is minimal. Precise. Sergio thinks that's perfect for this character." "What character?" Harry tapped the script. "The man with no name." Clint picked up the script again, flipped to the first page. There was no character name, just descriptions. "A stranger rides into town. The stranger lights a cigar. The stranger kills 3 men without speaking. He doesn't have a name?" "Nope." "Why not?" "Because Sergio wants him to be a myth, an archetype. Not a person, but an idea." Clint frowned. "That sounds pretentious. Maybe. But it also sounds interesting." They talked for another hour. Harry explained the logistics. They'd shoot in Almera, in southern Spain. The landscape was supposed to look like the American Southwest. The budget was tiny, under $200,000 total. Most of the cast would be Italian or Spanish actors dubbed into English later. Clint would be one of the only Americans on set. How long is the shoot? Clint asked. 3 months. Maybe less if things go smoothly. And I'd get $15,000? That's the offer. Plus expenses. Travel, lodging, meals. Clint was quiet for a long moment. What if I say no? Harry shrugged. Sergio finds someone else. Maybe James Coburn. Maybe Henry Fonda. Someone with a face that works. Fonda's a star. Why would he do this? He wouldn't. That's why Sergio wants you. After Harry left, Clint sat with the script for a long time. He read it cover to cover. Then he read it again. It was strange. Brutal. Almost operatic in its violence. Characters didn't talk much. They stared. They waited. They killed. The dialogue that existed was sparse. Cryptic. More like poetry than conversation. It was nothing like Rawhide. Nothing like any Western Clint had ever seen. But something about it pulled at him. Some instinct he couldn't quite name. Maggie came home from work. Found him still sitting there. What are you thinking? I'm thinking this is either the stupidest thing I've ever done or the best. Which one? I don't know yet. You're going to do it anyway, aren't you? Clint smiled. Yeah, I think I am. He arrived in Spain in March 1964. The production was even smaller than he'd imagined. No trailers, no craft services, just a handful of crew members, most of whom didn't speak English, working out of a converted farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Sergio Leone was 35 years old, stocky, intense. He spoke through an interpreter, but his hands did most of the talking. He'd gesture wildly, sketching shots in the air, moving people around like chess pieces. The first time Clint met him, Leone didn't say hello. He just walked in a circle around Clint, studying him from every angle. Then he nodded and said something in Italian. The interpreter translated, "He says you have the face of a killer who's already dead inside." Clint raised an eyebrow. That's supposed to be a compliment? With Sergio, yes. The shoot was chaos. Nothing was planned the way American productions were planned. Leone would wake up in the morning, look at the landscape, and decide what they were filming that day. Sometimes he'd throw out entire scenes. Sometimes he'd add new ones on the spot. The script Clint had read in Los Angeles bore almost no resemblance to what they were actually shooting. What happened to the massacre scene? Clint asked one day. Sergio cut it, the interpreter said. Why? He said it was too obvious. He wants the violence to feel like fate, not spectacle. Clint didn't know what that meant, but he trusted the way Leone worked. The man had a vision. It was strange and uncompromising and maybe a little insane, but it was clear. Leone didn't direct actors the way American directors did. He didn't talk about motivation or backstory. He just showed you what he wanted. He'd stand where you were supposed to stand. He'd look the way you were supposed to look. Then he'd step aside and let you do it. For most of the cast, this was frustrating. They wanted direction, explanation. But for Clint, it was perfect. Because Clint had learned on Rawhide that less was more, that stillness was power, that the camera loved restraint, and Leone was asking him to do nothing but restrain. Don't move unless you have to, Leone said through the interpreter. Don't speak unless the silence is unbearable. Let them wonder what you're thinking. What am I thinking? Leone smiled. You're thinking about killing them. But you're in no hurry. The film was called A Fistful of Dollars. It was loosely based on a Japanese samurai film called Yojimbo, though Leone never officially acknowledged that. The plot was simple. A stranger arrives in a town torn apart by two rival gangs. He plays them against each other. Violence ensues. The stranger leaves. But the way Leone filmed it, the long silences, the extreme close-ups, the operatic violence, made it feel like something new. something American westerns had never been. They finished shooting in early June. Clint flew back to Los Angeles. He didn't think much about the film. It had been an experience. Interesting. Strange. But he assumed it would play in a few European theaters and disappear. He went back to work on Rawhide, shot another season, moved on. Then, in November 1964, A Fistful of Dollars opened in Italy. It was a phenomenon. Lines around the block, sold-out screenings. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Some called it brilliant, others called it garbage. But audiences loved it. They loved the violence. They loved the style. They loved the man with no name, standing in dusty streets, staring down killers without saying a word. The film made over $20 million in Europe, 10 times its budget. Leone called Clint in February 1965. We make another one. Clint was skeptical. Same character, same idea. Different story. How much? 50,000. Clint thought about it. I want 100. There was a pause on the line. Then Leone laughed. Okay, 100,000. But you give me 3 films. 3? Yes, trilogy. 3 films. Same character, bigger each time. I can't commit to 3 films without reading the scripts. There are no scripts yet, just ideas. But you trust me, yes? Clint didn't answer right away. He thought about the first film, about how strange and beautiful and violent it had been, about how Leone had let him be still in a way no American director ever had. Yeah, Clint said finally. I trust you. They made for a few dollars more in 1965. Then The Good, The Bad, and the Ugly in 1966. Each film was bigger than the last. More ambitious, more expensive, more operatic. And each one made Clint Eastwood a bigger star. But the thing that changed cinema wasn't the violence, or the style, or even the character. It was the deal. Because buried in the contract Clint signed for The Good, The Bad, and the Ugly was a clause. A small clause that Leone's producers barely noticed. It said that Clint Eastwood retained a percentage of the merchandising rights and sequel rights for any character he portrayed in Leone's films. It was unusual, almost unheard of. Actors didn't own their characters, studios did. But Leone's producers were Italian. They didn't think in those terms, they just wanted to make the films. So they signed. And when The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly became the highest-grossing film in Italian history, when it made over $25 million worldwide, when it spawned countless imitators and established an entire genre, the spaghetti western, Clint Eastwood owned a piece of it. Not just the salary, not just the residuals, a piece of the character itself. And that changed everything, because suddenly, Clint wasn't just an actor for hire. He was a partner, a stakeholder, someone who had control over how his image was used. And he took that control and ran with it. In 1968, he started his own production company, Malpaso Productions. He produced his own films, directed his own films, controlled every aspect of his career. Other actors noticed. They started negotiating for ownership, for creative control, for the right to say no. The studio system, where actors were property, where they did what they were told, where they had no say in how their work was used, started to crumble. And it all traced back to a vague telegram, a 40-page script. A deal made for $15,000 in a language neither party fully understood. Sergio Leone died in 1989. Heart attack. He was 60 years old. He'd made only 7 films in his entire career. But those 7 films changed how people thought about westerns, about violence, about cinema itself. At his funeral, Clint Eastwood gave a eulogy. He was 60 years old by then. An icon, a director, an Oscar winner. He talked about meeting Leone, about the telegram, about arriving in Spain and having no idea what he was getting into. Sergio didn't speak English, Clint said. I didn't speak Italian. But somehow, we understood each other perfectly, because we both believed the same thing. What was that? Someone asked later. that cinema is a language, and if you speak it honestly, everyone can understand you, even if you don't share a single word. He paused. Sergio taught me that silence is louder than words, that stillness is more powerful than action, that sometimes the best way to say something is to not say anything at all. Someone asked about the $15,000, about whether he felt taken advantage of. Clint smiled. That $15,000 bought me a career, bought me freedom, bought me the right to make my own choices for the next 50 years. You tell me if that's a bad deal. But you could have asked for more. Maybe. But if I'd asked for more, maybe they would have said no. Maybe they would have hired someone else. Maybe none of it would have happened. He looked out at the crowd. The best deals aren't the ones where you get the most money. They're the ones where you get the most possibility. And Sergio gave me infinite possibility. He gave me a character with no name, which meant I could be anyone. He gave me a story with no rules, which meant I could tell any story I wanted after. He gave me permission to stop being what other people wanted and start being what I was. Years later, a film student asked Clint about the clause in the contract, the one that gave him ownership. Did you know what you were doing when you negotiated that? The student asked. No. I had no idea. Then why did you ask for it? Because I'd been fired from Universal for caring too much about what I was doing, for asking too many questions, for wanting to understand things. And I decided that if I was going to keep working, I needed to work in a way where caring wasn't a liability, where questions were expected, where understanding wasn't optional. And ownership gave you that? Ownership gave me control. And control gave me the freedom to care as much as I wanted, without anyone being able to tell me to stop. The student thought about that. So it wasn't about money? It's never about money. Money is just what happens when you make good choices consistently over time. What's it about then? Clint was quiet for a long moment. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to be anyone else, even when being someone else would be easier, even when being someone else would pay better. He smiled. Leone understood that. He didn't want me to be a cowboy. He didn't want me to be a hero. He wanted me to be a myth, something bigger than any single story. And you became that. No, I became myself. And it turned out that was mythical enough. The telegram still exists somewhere, in a box, in a vault, a piece of yellow paper with 11 words that changed everything. $15,000, 3 months in Spain, a director no one had heard of, a character with no name, and a deal that neither party fully understood, but both trusted anyway. That's the thing about the best deals. They don't make sense on paper. They don't follow the rules. They don't maximize short-term profit. But they create possibility. And possibility, given enough time and enough trust, becomes legacy. Sergio Leone gave Clint Eastwood $15,000. Clint Eastwood gave cinema a new language. And both of them became immortal in the process. Not because they were the smartest men in the room, but because they were willing to make a deal that no one else understood. And trust that the work would speak for itself. In silence. In stillness. In the space between words where truth lives. And that, more than any amount of money, is worth everything.